All right. Hey, everybody. It's Tuesday Talks. We've actually got the time right today. Apologize as we start off about last week. Had the timing set up for us to start right on schedule, and I think I had some technical difficulties last week. Last week I had my one of my lights fell over. I had the time wrong. So anyway, let's see here if we can get this. Make sure we're up and running. Hey, if you guys are here and you can hear me okay, would you give me a big thumbs up? Maybe even drop a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. I know we got folks really all over the country now that are tuning into this broadcast. I see Peggy. She's coming on right here. Peggy, are you watching from Portland? I'm guessing you are today. Good to see Peggy on. And Kevin Smith over in Eastern Idaho. Right on, right on, right on. We got Ted Settler coming from Portland, Oregon. And Peggy says she's here. Perfect. Thank you guys. Keep on posting. If you're here and you can hear me okay, then keep on posting. Let me know where you're watching from. Big deal for me to kind of know where folks are coming from. Partly because, okay, there's Sherry. Cool. Sherry, Ted's over in Beaverton. Love it. Love you guys being here. Thanks for being here with us. Hey, there's Andy either in Vancouver or he's working on the Oregon coast somewhere. He might be up in Gig Harbor doing something for that doctor guy he works for. People all over the Northwest. And then I believe we've been getting some folks tuning in from down in the Florida market. So Andy, I know Andy's gonna head down to Florida. Yep, currently. Oh, Colorado. Okay, so currently in Colorado, flying to Florida soon. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I have a different group. It's actually a Facebook community that is specifically focused around the Gulf Coast market. So if you guys are in Portland, if you're in Boise and you're looking for deals in the Gulf Coast area, I have quite a bit of, um, I guess, deals in the Pensacola market specifically. I used to live down there, studied for ministry down there, and built several homes down there. Remodeled a lot of homes myself as well with my brother-in-law. Worked for him anyway, so I have a lot of connections in the Pensacola market, and so started a group down there. And believe it or not, it's actually catching up with, as far as size wise, it's catching up with the PDX REI group as far as members. So crazy, crazy, crazy. If you guys are looking for deals, if anybody knows Kurt, you guys know Kurt and Jennifer McLaughlin, Northwest Invest. They do that big event every year. Kurt and Jennifer McLaughlin a couple of years ago started doing deals in Pensacola. I think they just went down there to find like a vacation home, started doing deals down there. I think they're spending their winters down there now. And they just joined, they're from Portland, of course. They just joined the Pensacola Off Market Property Facebook group. So if you guys are looking for anything in Pensacola, specifically Pensacola Off Market Properties is where we do deals down there. So Andy's headed down to Florida to hang out with Pace Morby. Pace is on the Creative Nation tour right now, so super cool. He's going to be in the Boise market here. I think coming up next. No, I think it's in April when he comes through Boise, and then of course over to Oregon. So looking forward to seeing him and the whole crew then. Andy will have to take some pictures and post them in the groups for us, so we all know what it looks like and what all happened down there. I'm sure it's going to be a blast. But wanted to talk. I've got my notes down here in front of me. I wanted to talk a little bit today about interest rates. Not really too much because it's kind of boring. It's a kind of a boring conversation, to be honest. At least the way I look at it. I don't have a lot of stock in interest rates when it comes to what I do in my business. I know it sounds kind of crazy. As a real estate investor, interest rates are a big deal. And I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm just saying it's not really my main driving factor. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but not too much. I want to talk a little bit about this, your thoughts on what about President Trump and the I don't know if it's an edict that he put out. Seems like some of these things are kind of getting crazy, but he put out this really kind of a shocking, it sends shockwaves around the country, this message on social media this week that he is going to put a ban on institutional buyers. BlackRock comes to mind, right? Institutional funds and buyers buying up single family homes. Now, to be very, very specific, that's obviously something that the single family homes is where most of your American families tend to live. And so the idea about saying, hey, BlackRock, you can't buy these properties. You can't just buy up single family homes and have them and overpay just because you guys need to get rid of your money. I think it's a good thing. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. And I'd love to hear some of you that are not super big fans of President Trump, what you think about it. Because I point that out because we're going to talk about this in a minute. But that whole idea of banning big institutional funds from buying single family homes, that's something that I have heard been screaming from the rooftops from people that have more of a left leaning political view. They've been screaming that for years. And now, again, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but we have a president that they don't really like very much. He does it. And now they're finding all kind of reasons why it's going to backfire. It's interesting to me. So we'll see a little bit more about that. And then I want to talk a little bit about, I kind of want to wind things up with just the realities of real estate investing. So before we jump into everything, I wanted to tell you guys two quick things. First of all, PDX REI Group meetup is scheduled for this week. Okay, so if you're in the Portland area, that is scheduled to go down here this week, and it's going to be happening on Thursday the 15th. Okay, now I have something I want to say that is somewhat sensitive, although I don't think that she would mind hearing it. But my daughter-in-law, so some of you guys know my daughter-in-law, married to my oldest son. Her mother passed away very unexpectedly, and her father passed away when she was younger. My daughter-in-law's mom passed away unexpectedly right at the beginning of the new year. And so, as you can imagine, taking it pretty hard. She's 24 years old, just lost her mom. Now she's kind of, left alone in the world, so to speak. She still has brothers and some sisters, and of course us. But my daughter-in-law's mother passed away, and because of the fact that the funeral planning and all those things had to be done, of course, as you can all know. My wife and I have to attend. We don't have to. We're going to be attending the funeral, which is in northern Idaho, up in Post Falls, Idaho. And here's the thing: because of that funeral, we're going to be having to leave early in the morning on Friday to get there. Actually, might even be leaving Thursday, and that means I'm not going to actually be able to make it out to the PDX REI Group meetup live. Okay. Now, I say all that to say this. Andy says he's going to miss both meetups in Oregon, and he says enjoy. So the thing is this. I've been thinking, what if we did for the PDX REI Group meetup, and I want to get you guys' feedback because I don't want to do something just for the sake of doing it and then find out it didn't really bring any value to anybody. But I've been thinking about doing a live stream like this format, live to whoever comes and hangs out at the PDX REI Group. So obviously I've already got the space reserved. We've already got that on hold. We would do food. We would have to have Peggy go pick it all up. Peggy, please, if you're going to do it, help us out. Maybe Sherry could get in there. Maybe a couple of you guys that are local to the Portland market could get together, put the word out. We could still do the meetup. And then I would just actually live stream in a segment just like this. I actually have a really cool presentation that I think is going to be helpful. And I want to do it if you guys in the Portland market want to do it. Okay, so I'll be streaming right into the room. We have that big, huge screen. It's an awesome space. Love to have you guys' feedback on that. So I'm going to need you to let me know. Give me some feedback. Give me some thumbs up, you Portland folks, and let me know if that's something we should still plan on doing. Because I'm going to make an announcement today whether we're going to proceed as planned or if we're going to cancel and put it off till next month. So that being said, you guys help me put the word out, get some feedback, let me know what you think about doing that. It wouldn't be with me there in person, but it would be something we could do it together. So thank you guys. Andy, thank you for the condolences. Ted, thank you for your prayers. Yeah, it's just, it's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, you get up one morning and everything's fine. You get up the next morning and a person that you loved and is, how do you replace mom, right? So you can imagine my daughter-in-law is taking it pretty hard. She is such a trooper. Her dad died when she was younger. So she's already been through that loss before, but now not getting to say goodbye to her mom, really tough, just tough. Didn't know it, but mom had some health issues that hadn't really manifested in a big way, but that's what happened. So Peggy says, how about next Thursday? Here's the thing about doing the meetup next Thursday is I've already been asked to come and be a part of a junior camp, junior winter camp, the next 2 weekends. So this weekend was, and first of all, this weekend is of course our third Thursday, or this third Thursday. So then next Thursday, I've got to be headed up into the mountains up in McCall, Idaho, to speak at a junior camp to a bunch of teenage kids. And then the week after that, my wife and I are taking up a group of the senior high teenage kids. So anyway, I love the feedback. Thank you, Peggy. Getting over to the Idaho side, if you guys are here locally in Boise, by the way, if you guys aren't local to Portland or Boise, we'll get to you in just a minute. It's not just all about the local stuff, but we love local because local is where real deals happen. It's where connections take place. It's where joint ventures happen. I just love the local meetup. Don't you guys? If you guys love the local meetup, give me a thumbs up in the chat. Give me some love in the chat if you guys love the local meetups. And if you do love the local meetups, and if you are local to the Treasure Valley, guess what? I've got great news for you guys. We are doing our first TV REI group meetup. That's going to be happening February 5th. Okay, I think I threw out a date last week, but we didn't have the room space locked in. We've got it locked in. February 5th here in Meridian, Idaho. It's going to be at First American Title. I've got all the details. We're getting ready to put that out there in the group. But yes, Ted, I'm with you like that. I love local meetups too. And, I love local meetups that actually bring value. That's one thing I've noticed about a lot of real estate meetups is they kind of just, you get in there, you do the thing, and, it's like, okay, this is cool, and networking and people exchange cards. But I love the local meetups that we do because we bring so much value. We bring food, we bring a lot of high energy, we bring real value, we bring in good speakers. Anyway, it's pretty cool. Okay. Hey, Sherry, do me a big favor. Can you let me know if the Instagram is running right now? So on my end, it says it's live, but I don't know if it actually is or not. So, and I can't tell because this thing is goofy. If you guys ever use StreamYard, then I will tell you sometimes it can get really complicated. So Sherry says, is there an RSVP for this week? Yes, I'll be putting that out today. We had everything ready to go, ready to launch. And then of course, it was all kind of hanging in the balance for the funeral arrangements. And I kind of want some feedback from you guys. Let me know, but I think we'll go ahead and do it. It just might be a smaller turnout, but either way, I'm going to be putting out the RSVP event for that. Okay, let's get into this. How many of you, let me know in the chat if you saw the news about President Trump telling the Federal Reserve, so basically Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, telling them that they needed to basically dump a bunch of money into the mortgage industry. I'm not going to get into all the details of it because of the fact that, frankly, I don't understand all of it. I told you guys this a few minutes ago. I don't necessarily, I'm not a huge, like keeping up with every nuance of what's going on with, securities and with all kinds of stuff. Sherry says, I'm not live on Instagram. Well, that's a bummer. That is a real bummer because on my end, it says that I am. But, well, I kind of wondered, though, because I had the sneaking suspicion it wasn't actually live. So, well, that's too bad. Oh, well, we'll figure it out. This thing is a goofy mess. But let's see here. Let's go to that. Let's go to this. I'm going to do this real quickly, guys, while we're talking. And Sherry, you'll have to double check with me on this real quick. I'm just going to try this. Nothing like trying to run, a studio live while you're, looking at the screen and, all the rest of this stuff. Let's go into this and let's go there. Yeah, it's saying that it's live, but I don't think that it is. Anyway. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this matter of injecting all this money into the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae because basically the idea is it would be forcing interest rates down a little bit. There'd be some kind of renewed energy about these different federally backed loan programs being able to be issued. And there's a lot of talk right now between the chairman and there's some investigations going on. There's a whole bunch of drama going on up in those places, as I'm sure you're aware of. But what I wanted to ask you guys about is, I don't know if you guys saw the report that inflation was like at I'm looking at my notes here. I saw that inflation in December was around 2.7%. Did you guys see that news? And typically, inflation is one of those indicators of like, hey, how's the market doing? How's the economy doing? And so when I look at, inflation as an indicator, obviously it is something that matters, and it matters for a variety of reasons. And I'm not at all saying that it doesn't matter. But when I think about inflation the way that some people do, I think some people use it as too much of an indicator of what's going on with the economy. Because here's the part that people miss: inflation didn't necessarily fall, it just kind of stalled. Okay. Sherry says still not live. Yeah, I'm gonna scrap Instagram today. We're gonna leave Instagram alone. Not sure what happened, but I don't want to try to go fix it and make you guys hang out and wait for me. So thank you, Sherry, for checking on that. So if inflation doesn't actually fall drastically, if it just kind of stalls, in other words, at least it's not going up, right? Then it means that the Fed is not going to rush. The rate cuts might continue, like they might go ahead and cut back on some rate cuts, or they might just pause it and say, hey, you know what? It's not going up anymore, so let's just leave the rates alone. And so that's why I think this idea about, talk about lowering rates doesn't necessarily mean really much of anything for the average consumer buyer, right? I mean, obviously it gets a bunch of people excited, but if you have, mortgage relief and through injecting, the Fed injecting money into these different programs, and you have, hey, the inflation's not going up, so that means the economy's good again. Let's go out and, lower the interest rates and get people buying again. I don't necessarily think that that's exactly what's going to happen. I kind of think that there's a lot more about headlines than it really actually is making any difference. You guys agree with me? Yes or no? Throw a yes or no in the chat. Do you agree that the news about interest rates these days doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have actual federal drops, cuts in the Fed, right? We're not going to have the Fed. By the way, do you guys know that the Fed and the Federal Reserve, they do not set the mortgage rates? Like, you guys know that, right? They're not the ones that set the interest rates. Mortgages follow what's called the bond market, and this is tied to 10-year treasuries, and investor confidence is another big one. Obviously, that's a huge one. And then, of course, inflation expectations. So the idea is, if inflation is expected to rise, if the cost of goods is expected to rise, then sometimes the mortgage rates will get lowered a little bit. The Fed will lower the interest rates, and then the mortgage rates, sometimes they follow, sometimes they don't. A lot of times they do, but a lot of times, unless it's a significant drop, it's not going to make any huge difference in what it is that you're trying to do. So the Fed cuts rates, okay, but if inflation sticks, or if job markets weakens, or there's global uncertainty. By the way, if you notice, there's some global uncertainty right now. Good night. We got stuff going on in Iran and Syria and Israel, right? We have the stuff going on with the, all kinds of, in Venezuela. I mean, what in the world? It's crazy. It's crazy. Which, by the way, if you are someone who's familiar with the Bible, you shouldn't be surprised at all about how crazy things are. In fact, the crazier it gets, the more we see things in the Bible being actually seen as absolutely true once again. So I don't worry about this stuff. Obviously, it's horrible, the things that happen to people. And, Peggy says, your news doesn't mean anything. They can't be trusted. That's absolutely correct. Peggy, I don't believe any of the news media people for the most part. So I used to see some friends that said, they had a sticker that says, I don't believe the liberal news media. And I thought about getting one that says, I don't believe the liberal news media or the right-wing news media. Like, all of these, alternative news and You have these different groups. What's turned into is it's turned into this like this polarization mechanism where everybody's polarized, and now they kind of just follow the voice of their respective leader, and you have less critical thinking, you have more just following along, and it's just not a good thing. So I don't believe a bunch of that stuff, but here's what I do know: mortgage rates are a real thing, right? Interest rates are a real thing. It does actually affect our market to a certain extent, but I want to talk about this in just a minute. It doesn't. We'll come back around to this. It doesn't necessarily have to affect you drastically. That is, as a real estate investor, it's not necessarily something that you have to be waiting for a certain thing to go a certain way before you do anything. Okay, does that make sense? We'll talk about that in just a minute. Peggy, you're right. It's drama everywhere, right? Sherry says stagflation, right? Exactly. It's not what do they call it? It's not stagnation, it's stagflation. So I want to talk about this real quickly. How many of you guys heard the news? Say yes or no. Did you hear that President Trump wants to put a ban on institutional buyers buying up single family homes in America? Yes or no? Yes or no? Did you guys hear this news? I'm sure you heard about this, right? President Trump came out this week and said, or last week rather, and said, I'm calling for a ban on institutional buyers buying single family homes. Now, let's talk about that. Okay. There's a lot of noise right now about this. And obviously it's, there's people that are, okay, yes. Sherry says yes. Ted says yes. Let's see here. You guys, I'm checking the comments. You guys hear about this, right? Heard that in the news? Yes. Now, obviously, I just said I don't believe everything in the news. Well, some stuff is, okay, that's very believable. We see that that's actually the case. Here's the idea behind this. Okay, Wall Street is told they can't. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on this, Sherry. Cautiously optimistic. That's how I feel about it too. So Wall Street is basically told, hey, you got to step back from buying. Now, you guys understand how in the world Wall Street got involved in the first place in buying up single family homes, right? Like, think about this. Obviously, buying up multifamily and commercial properties has always been something that has happened in Wall Street, right? So there's always been that thing that goes on, but it hasn't been the norm, at least traditionally, for Wall Street buyers. We talk about Wall Street, talking about big funds, publicly traded companies, institutional buyers getting involved in single family homes. I mean, think about it. A single family home can only house traditionally one family, right? So you think about it's a single family home. That doesn't mean that you can't have more than one family. It just means that as an actual model, single family homes has not been something that big investors, especially large institutional investors, have looked at as a viable product, right? Because you can only put one, and you got turnover, and then so it's better to buy a bunch of units all under one roof, and then keep those units occupied. You can have it count on a certain 5% vacancy. Have certain operating costs. You have your net operating income, your NOI. It just makes it a lot easier. Now, single family homes, they're a lot different, right? They vary. And so for a long time, it just hasn't been a thing. Now, what changed that? I'd love to see you guys' feedback here in the comments. What is it that changed the interest that Wall Street had in getting into single family home buying? Why did they do that? What happened? Well, you guys probably remember this little thing called the Great Recession. Remember that? 2007, 2000, the market started getting wonky. People started wondering what was going on. 2008, the entire bottom fell out. 2009, it really came into effect. And foreclosures across the country, banks going under, all that stuff. Remember that? It wasn't that long ago, really. When all that happened, um, what what you had is you had like this massive dirge of all these empty properties sitting on the market, right? And now they're all owned by banks, and these banks, many of these banks actually failed because they had all these faulty loans. They were basically loans that weren't any good, but they did hold the title to these properties. And so, without going into all the details of exactly how it happened, suffice to say, what happened was some big institutional funds started stepping in and saying, hey, we know you own all these properties. Tell you what, we'll take 30 of these properties, we'll take 100, we'll take 300 of these properties off your hands. They're buying it in bulk as a one-time purchase, but they're buying up these properties and these deeds of these mortgages for pennies on the dollar, right? So you talk about the rule of 70% of the ARV minus the cost of repairs minus the the fee or the commission. Man, the big institutional buyers with all this capital, some of these big investors, just a handful first, because at the time nobody wanted to have single family. The banks couldn't get rid of it, so the bank said, "Hey, you'll take it off our hands? Yeah, it's already a loss. Here you go." So they unloaded all these properties, and it began to become a popular thing for these funds to go in and generate these huge purchases by using the capital that they had collectively put together. And of course, at the time, you have the guy, I can't remember his name, but he had founded that basically a private contractor. I don't know if it wasn't Halliburton, but it was something like, these guys would basically go over there and they're, a bunch of ex-military guys, and they're doing all this crazy stuff in Iraq and Iran, and in Afghanistan and stuff. Remember that? And so they were pulling security detail for these companies were going in and drilling, and there was just all this oil interest and the big military industrial complex, and all that stuff was happening. And some of these guys made a absolute fortune. So what they did is they took that money, and that's really where BlackRock began. If you study the history of it, they had made this huge amount of money. I had this book about that thick about BlackRock and the founder of it. And these guys are not exactly the best guys. If you look at everything, but regardless, that could be said about a lot of different companies, unfortunately. Anyway, they go back and they have all this money from all these huge government contracts providing security detail for all these big things going on in the Middle East. And they have all this money, and they just started buying up real estate, and they started buying up these huge swaths of single family homes. And it became popular, even to the point where even right now, there's a lot of funds that will buy real estate. And I'll give you an example of this. They'll buy real estate, okay, for actually over and above asking price. They went from getting it for nothing to now you have these institutions with all this money because they have all this investor capital, and they'll actually pay more money for a single family home in your neighborhood than you would pay, or than any other, reasonable investor or even a homeowner would pay. Why? Because they have the capital to deploy, and they're not expecting a return on that particular purchase for many years down the road, which they can expect that it's going to come up to the price that they pay. It's actually a brilliant strategy. It's just that it's edged a lot of typical home buyers out of the market. And so you guys understand a little bit about how that works, right? You understand there's these big institutional buyers. Remember just a couple of years ago, remember when Zillow was buying houses? You guys remember? Comment Zillow in the comments if you remember. Say Zillow in the comments if you guys remember when Zillow was buying up property. Remember, you could go to Zillow, see what the Zestimate was, and you could get an offer right there. Zillow would actually buy it, and they were buying it. You could go actually to look up PropStream and ownership records, and they would actually, you could see Zillow Corp or Zillow Group owned the property. Kevin says a big thing that will matter is what is an institutional investor? Is there a specific group, or would it trickle down to small fund investors? That's a great question, Kevin, and I'm sure that stuff is going to have to be worked out in the courts and in the law rooms. Legislators are going to have to figure that out, and guarantee you they're going to find some way to work around it, right? Maybe they'll divest, and they'll break up into smaller groups that are just underneath the threshold. The thing is I don't personally think it's going to make a massive difference. But remember when Zillow was doing that? Yeah, Zillow, yeah, Peggy's got it exactly right. That's where I was going. Fake comps, okay? So it sets up fake comps, okay? So here's what Zillow was doing. And I remember because I was looking at some properties over there in, what is the name of that? It's right there in it's between Beaverton and Tigard. There's I think it's Cooper Mountain. You guys, if I'm right on that, is Cooper Mountain a thing? There's that area right there, kind of just south of Beaverton, Aloha. As you go down into Tigard, there's that mountain right there. I think it's called Cooper Mountain. Well, I remember I was looking at a property over there, and I'm I was looking at that property. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Okay. So I'm looking at that property and I remember thinking to myself, man, this property seems like it shouldn't be worth this much. But I don't know how in the world did it go up this much. And I started looking at properties around. I was on PropStream. I could look up and see who owns it and when they purchased it and how much they paid. And I started noticing that all around this property that I was looking at purchasing, all around it, almost every house that was owned in that area was owned by Zillow Group, Zillow Corp or Zillow Group. They had a couple different company names they were buying under. And so Zillow was paying these crazy amounts of money. You guys remember this? Not too long ago, Zillow was paying these crazy amounts of money to buy up properties, and they would oftentimes buy up. Think about this. If you bought up the same kind of floor plan, same kind of bedroom, bathroom configuration, and you bought up one house and then you bought up the house next to it and bought up the next house to it. And every time you bought a house next to it, you would pay more than what it should have been worth. Well, guess what you do eventually? You raise the collective value of each of your individual properties. Why? Because comps go by what the price that it's sold for, right? So it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of a brilliant strategy. The problem was that it didn't really actually work, right? It didn't work very well. It backfired. Zillow was going crazy. They were buying up properties that were just, they were just overpaying ridiculously. And eventually people were going, wait, what is going on here? Remember? And then Zillow all of a sudden came out and like, oh, all that money we spent on all these houses, the houses aren't actually worth that much. They kind of got caught with their pants down and it turned into a big stink. I'm sure investors lost money. But the point is this, that big institutional type of buyer is really not, I don't want to say it's not fair because to be honest, if you're going by the mindset of, oh, it's not fair, well, then you probably shouldn't be in business. You probably shouldn't be, I don't know what you should be doing, but life is not fair. Okay. Having said that, the idea of massive institutional buyers, and like Kevin said, we got to define what is an institutional buyer. I don't like the idea of institutional buyers being able to buy up properties, and frankly, I don't think a lot of people do. Right? Who would really be in favor of big institutional buyers being able to buy up single family home real estate? You don't have to think about it too long. The only people that would be in favor of that are big institutional buyers, right? They're the only ones that want to do this. And so for most folks, and I would say let's see what Andy says, institutionals usually buy apartments and large assets, but some do buy homes. Yes, there's enough, Andy, to where it came out in the news that Trump says we're going to put a ban on this. We're not going to allow institutional buyers to come anymore. And here's what I find fascinating. Now, listen, whether it actually has the effect that, is intended or not, because there is an article, I was reading an article today. I'll just read you a couple lines from this article. It said, you could tell this guy is definitely, whoever writes this is definitely anti-Trump. But he says the biggest part of the overall affordability problem is it's crucial to voters, so increasingly dominates the debate. And something like that. What is he saying? He said Americans' household expense has grown so enormous that most first-time buyers don't have a chance to take it on. Okay. Trump proposes an orthodox fix, blocking institutional investors from amassing homes to rent. Okay, so this is something that Trump he said this January 6th. It's kind of a big thing. And then what was interesting about it is this guy basically says this. He says restricting institutional housing buyers is counterproductive, says a leading expert. The president and his growing crowd of allies from both parties are essentially arguing that by purchasing large numbers of single-family homes, either in new developments or long-standing neighborhoods, renting them out, large investors are substantially shrinking the inventory available for sale. That supposedly drives up prices for regular folks. Well, there's nothing supposedly about it. It actually does. Since they're bidding on a pool of available houses that's a lot smaller than if the big players weren't competing, okay? The theory goes, stop the institutional buying, led by such publicly trading giants as Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent. You guys have probably seen their signs before. Maybe you didn't know it, but you were looking at them. An array of investment firms, so on and so forth. This expert says there's no empirical evidence that large institutions have driven up housing prices, says Ed Pinto, co-director of the American Enterprise Institute Housing Center. Pinto argues that the rise of institutional buyers is a symptom, not a cause of housing crisis. In fact, they're helping to address the real problem that misguided policies engineered on Wall Street and Main Street and Washington, D.C. caused in the first place. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. You guys can read the article yourself. It's on Fortune. Fortune has an online article about that. Here's what I find comical. It seems like some people, it doesn't matter if the president, this current president, and this is true, by the way, on both sides politically, but it seems like some people, it's just like your hypocrisy is showing a little bit. And here's what I mean. You have people that have been screaming about this issue on the left for years. And this is actually one of those things where I don't necessarily align with a lot of things on the left side of the political aisle, but there are some things that just make sense, right? There are some things that it doesn't have anything to do with someone's, genitals or, pronouns. It's just like, hey, no, this actually makes sense. And there's stuff like that I'm like, hey, yeah, that makes sense. That's totally, absolutely agreeable. And here you actually have this issue being addressed by someone in office. They actually have the gumption to step out and say, hey, we're not only we're going to not allow this, we're going to do something about it. We're going to actually call it out what it is. Now, whether it has the effect or not remains to be seen, right? I don't know. Here's the thing is if we don't increase the supply, because really the big issue is that we're tens of thousands of houses short of new construction homes in America. That's also still a vestige leftover from the 2008 crisis, because in 2008, the people got hit super hard with the construction field, investors, and contractors. So a lot of contractors went out of business, switched into different fields. You had a lot of people that got completely out of the construction field. I was a construction guy only at the time, and I had to find a different way to make a living. I didn't do a very good job, but I at least added real estate to what I do, and that's now my main thing, of course. But the point is this. You have a massive housing shortage in America. That really is an issue. And it's an issue that's caused by a lack of new construction. And why aren't there a bunch of people out there building new homes? Because it is crazy hard to try to actually get permits and build in some of these areas where the actual demand is. Yeah, you could get a house built in, some little backwoods, alley town in Missouri or Alabama, but the places where people live, where the jobs are, where the demand is, it's crazy hard to get a new house built. Someone gave me a lead from Portland for lots this last weekend. Hey, I've got a lead on some lots. I said, well, unless they're free, unless these lots in Portland, if they're inside city limits of Portland, unless they are free, unless it's free dirt, I'm not interested. Don't even send it over. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, because if it's not free, I know this, I'm already have $100,000 bill just to get a permit, all the stuff done to get permitting to get a house built. Now, I'm using really, really general terms, right? It may not be exactly $100,000, but the last time I checked, which was about 3 years ago, to get a permit, I actually kind of went through some of the process and checked it all out. And by the time you pay for everything, before you've ever turned over one shovel of dirt, you've got about $100,000, anywhere from, and I would say it ranges, but anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000 in fees and studies and all these different things just so that you can start building the house. Okay, that doesn't include the cost of purchasing the land. You see what I'm saying? And so from my point of view, this whole idea about housing shortage, well, that needs to go back to make it easy to build again. Okay. Cut back all the bureaucratic nonsense and let builders build, and don't protest and don't try to stop everything and all this stuff. No, there's a huge demand for housing. Let the builders build the housing. You don't like the big apartments and you don't like the 3-story houses. Well, then expand the urban growth boundary a little bit. Let there be some buildings. Let there be some single family homes. It's this anyway. You guys can tell I get a little bit, carried away with this because it's just ridiculous. You have political factions that don't want new construction to be built, and then these same political factions whine about the fact that it costs so much to buy a house, but they don't want any new houses. They don't want any new inventory added. And if someone is coming along and saying, "Hey, I'm just going to use my money in this free market and buy this all up," they go, "Hey, we don't want you doing that. The housing is already bad enough," which I agree with them. But then you have a president that steps in and says, "We're going to stop these guys from being able to buy," and all of a sudden now you're going to pick it apart and find some reason. Well, that's not really the problem. No, it's not, but it's at least addressing it in a certain way. So anyway, guys, I'm done with that. I'd love to know you guys' thoughts on that. Am I out of line? Am I, I'm not getting political here. I really am not. Some of this stuff is just common sense. And it feels like with certain people, no matter what the proposed solution is, there's going to be a bunch of complaining and moaning going on no matter what. And I don't have a lot of patience for that. It's like, hey, listen, if you're not going to do something to fix the problem, then just shut your mouth and step aside. At least somebody's trying to address it. That's just me personally. Okay, so why are we talking about all this? Well, talking about all this to kind of just address, or maybe I want to land on this thought. Okay. I would say this. I would say rate cuts don't necessarily they don't necessarily make a good market, okay? Because if you have rates being cut drastically low, it's actually an indicator of other things, okay? So you kind of have this balance, right? If you lower rates in one area, well, then you're increasing potential, problems in another area. You talk about stopping institutional buyers from buying single family homes. Okay, like I get that. I actually agree with that. I like it. I'm not sure it's going to change anything. I know one thing, some people, it's not going to change a darn thing because they can't be happy no matter what. But I think the idea of, kind of blocking out some of these big institutional buyers, and that's what I would like to see. I'd like it to be an actual, not your average small investor group, but hey, these big boys with billions of dollars to spend, no, go play with multifamily, go play with commercial. Good night. I mean, go out and, get into development and bring some money into the housing market, right? You guys got the money to throw around and play all those permitting costs and games. Go do that. Stay out of single family. Let my kids be able to afford to buy a house, right? Let your kids and your grandkids be able to one day get into owning a home. Now, who knows? By the time all of our kids are grown up and looking for housing, maybe they won't even want to live, in grandma's old, 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, right? But who knows, man? It's like this. It's kind of crazy. But I think that idea of the American dream of owning your own home, I think it's still alive, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. We'll see what happens. But here's what I wanted to talk about, and as we kind of wind things down. Now, I want to say this clearly. Some of my best deals didn't come from low interest rates. Okay? They came from helping sellers who were stuck like Chuck in a pickup truck, okay? They were stuck. It came from structuring creative terms. It came from borrowing capital in creative ways, okay, using capital from other investors and lenders in a creative way. It came from getting paid on the front end and building something that makes me get paid on the back end. In other words, it comes from my best deals have come from structure, okay, from offering solutions. Okay, sometimes people don't really care what the structure is; they just need a solution. Okay, and then the other thing is just, make sure your numbers are correct. If the market is going up, right, and then it's going to go down, well, as long as when it was going up, you bought it at a low enough price to where at that point in the graph it was lower than what the market said at the time, you're going to be okay. It's going to do this. Money, the market's going to go up and down, but the point of all this is saying the reality of real estate is this. The reality of real estate as far as investing goes, that's kind of what the show is about, real estate investing. It's not hinging on interest rates per se, although that does matter, especially say if you're a flipper and you're going to be putting this retail product back on the market for a retail buyer. Well, make sure that you got your numbers right. So it's not about all these things like interest rates and the Federal Reserve and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and Donald Trump and the BlackRock, all that stuff. Does it have a part? Of course it does. But folks, there's millions of houses sitting on the market today, single family homes that are completely vacant. There's a massive amount of properties out there that need to be purchased. They need to be restored. They need to be put back on the market. And you could still do that. You could go out and flip a house this year. You could go out and bird dog. I was just talking to a guy who's messaging me from a Facebook group. He's like, hey, I want to send you a deal. And we were talking about it. And he says, well, I want to know how much am I going to get paid? Just tell him, hey, bring me a good deal and I'll make sure you get paid. But bring me a good deal or bring me a good lead. And those two are not the same, right? A lead is not a deal. A lead is an address and maybe a phone number. A deal is a contract that's signed and they say, hey, the seller agreed that they would take this much for it. And do you want to buy it for this much? Well, if it makes sense for a flip, yeah, I'll buy it. The point is this: you've got to get into, like Peggy says, absolutely, Peggy nailed it, solving problems. Get good at solving problems. Get good at communicating your solution. And I promise you, it won't matter what the market is doing. It won't matter what the interest rates are. It won't matter. None of that stuff will matter because you'll be getting deals. You'll be locking stuff up. Why? Because you're solving someone's problem. So my John Buys Houses slogan is unique solutions for unique situations. And, I don't know where I came up with that or somebody came up with that for me, but the point is this: like, if you provide value, then you're going to have deals. And I want you guys to understand the market's going to ebb and flow. That's just normal. Administrations are going to change. That's just normal. But real estate in its essence hasn't changed in over 100 years. Okay. People need places to live. Supply takes time, right? Bringing in construction and a new construction and building these new homes so that someone can move into that new home and vacate another one. That's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. Demand doesn't disappear. Here's the thing. People are talking about, these Dubai and all this stuff. It's like, listen, nobody's trying to get across the border to get into Dubai. I shouldn't say nobody, but I'm just saying, like, that's not a thing. You know where people are still trying to get into, even if it's illegally, even if it's the risk of being deported or all kinds of expenses, and you know where people are trying to get into this country. And I would say a lot of the people trying to get into this country are not necessarily bad people. There are some bad ones, and frankly, I'm glad that some of those bad ones are getting booted out. But yes, Quentin, I love that. I love America too. Appreciate that, brother. The thing is America is a place where people want to be. And so what that means is they're trying to get here. And no matter whether they're coming here through all the proper channels or not, there's still a demand, especially in the larger metropolitan cities in America where there's good job market. There's still a demand for housing, which means this: you just have to get good at sourcing off-market leads. Those are my preference. You can still do stuff on market, but off-market is that's where I've always made my best money. Off-market leads, negotiating the best price by offering real, tangible, sensible solutions to people that have problems. Now, for us in the investor world, a lot of the deals that we do are kind of a small little piece of the pie, right? Just a little sliver. We're just doing a little slice. It's not the traditional real estate. Maybe some of you guys are into traditional, that's fine. But the point is this: when you're dealing with this small little sliver of distressed sellers or distressed properties, or the double whammy combo, distressed sellers with distressed properties, when you're dealing with those types of properties, there's a lot of room to make really good money on those, not because you're taking advantage of somebody, but because you're providing the solution that they need. And you get that thing locked up, somebody's going to want to buy it if you get it locked up low enough. And I don't mean hurt the seller. What I mean is ask them, does this work for you? Know your numbers, know what you can get it locked up for, and then go in there and put your margin in and go in there and put your value in, either flip it or wholesale it, all that stuff. It makes a big difference. Hey, Quentin, I'm with you, brother. I love these comments. People risk their lives to come here. I'm proud to be America. Ton of opportunities. That's right. As someone who's been to multiple other countries, and especially a lot of these countries, I made a post about this a couple weeks ago. I've been to most of the countries I've been to. A couple of exceptions, but most of the places I've been to have been still what they call developing nations. So Papua New Guinea up in the highlands, East Africa in Malawi. We're talking about up in the mountains of Vietnam, back in these little villages and these little river boats to get there. Fiji, after the hurricane went through there, up on the side of the island that got hit the hardest by that hurricane, that typhoon a couple years ago. Where else? Good night. Thailand. I've been to so many places. I can't remember all of them right now. But the thing that I noticed about all those places is this: in all those places, the very basic necessities to live, that's what most people are focusing on day to day. So there's people that break away from that. I'm not saying all these countries are horrible at all, but I'm saying a lot of people are like, you know what? I have to do better for my family. Where am I going to go? And they tend to want to get here to get into the workflow. They want to get into owning real estate. And the reality is that America is still the place where people want to be, and that means that our properties are worth a lot more than they are in other places in the world. And that means that there's opportunity for us, regardless of what the market's doing. The reality is, real estate in America is still the best game in town. And I don't know about you guys, but I like living here. Amen. I like waking up and having hot water. I like waking up and having, for the most part, a pretty secure place, safe place. And you say, well, with all this stuff going on, listen, as bad as it is, don't think that that's the norm. Okay. And as bad as it is, some of the stuff that you see, and yes, there's going to be violence, there's going to be injustice, there's going to be abuse of authority, there's going to be all this kind of stuff, because that's just the history books show us that that's the way humanity works. But in America, and I can say this from personal experience, having been in a lot of other places in the world, in America, that's not going to be the norm. That's going to be the exception. Whereas in a lot of other places in the world, just waking up and surviving the day is kind of what the whole thing is about. People spend their entire lives doing that. So anyway, wasn't trying to get all patriotic, wasn't trying to get all political. We're not trying to do that today. I'm just saying real estate investing is still the best bet in town. It's not easy. It's not automatic. You definitely don't want to go at it alone, which is why we have the PDX REI group meetups. It's why we have the TV REI group meetup. It's why we have these Facebook communities. It's why we do this stuff, because we want you guys to connect. Okay, so I hope you guys, speaking of that, I hope you guys will share the news about these different meetups. Post it. Make sure you ask your questions in the comments, and we'll come back and get that. But if you guys are interested in the details for the meetup, just drop it, whether you're in Portland or whether you're in the Boise area, comment meetup, and then I'll make sure I get you the link. Okay. So post meetup in the comments, and I will make sure that I personally send you the link to either one. And that way you guys, and if you want to say, meetup Portland or meetup Boise, then I'll know where you're at, but just send meetup and I'll make sure I get you the links. Appreciate you guys. God bless you. It's time for me to get on to the next appointment. If you guys got value out of this, give us a big thumbs up. As they say in YouTube world, smash that like button, right? You guys go ahead and help us out. Spread the word. Get the word out about these Tuesday talks because we're growing. It's slow growth. It's the right kind of growth, but we do it. We have a good time. Hopefully you guys got value out of this. Appreciate you all. All right, Andy, you guys have a good time down in Florida. And Sherry, I see your comment. I will get you the information. Andy, meet up. Cool. All right, guys. God bless. I got to go. Thanks for being here today, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.